Hey, it's Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. This is the next episode in our new series, Next Generation 911 FutureMakers, Building the Leaders of Tomorrow. One of the best parts about my job that I really enjoy is that I get to meet and talk to some of the best people within the public safety industry. And a long friend of mine has been an individual who started out as a telecommunicator, worked his way up through a supervisor and a trainer, and ultimately was the state coordinator for training in the great state of Tennessee. And I have to say great state because my daughter's down there now, which actually makes it even greater. He's a past president of the NENA Institute Board, a past president of NENA, and he is now the customer success director of RapidSOS. None other than Jamison Peevyhouse, ENP, someone who I consider a good friend and a next-gen 911 future maker. My friend, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Absolutely, Mark. I've never missed an opportunity to sit down and chat with you for a little while and go back and forth quite a bit. So I've really enjoyed it. And thank you for the kind introduction, because seems like I've done a lot, but really I've just had some great people around me throughout my entire career.
Well, you know what? That's the thing, right? It takes a village to run something, and
Right.
we certainly have a very interesting village within the public safety industry.
I'm not sure. Am I still the village idiot? I have to make sure, because I think we trade roles sometimes.
That's my job. I like being the village idiot. I'm a village
bad.
idiot with a podcast, which makes me dangerous. You've been in public safety for a couple of decades, probably nearly 3 decades now.
Yeah.
And you came from the ground up, which I think is really, really important. Who helped you along your way?
Oh, man. Well, I've always had the great honor to have great bosses, people who were, in charge of me or over me, that allowed me to run a little bit and to explore some new frontiers, but also were patient and forgiving when those new frontiers didn't work out, or we did something that wasn't correct, to come back and correct that. So I would say probably first and foremost, the very first 911 board person I ever knew was my dad. He was chairman of the first 911 board when the very first year in Tennessee. And I think that's where my love started, when I was just really like 11 years old, and watching him address. And then he went on to do other things. He was a pastor full-time a long time, and he still serves as a full-time paramedic. And in this era of COVID, he's working, 70, 80 hours every single week on the truck. And so I've always said my feet are a little bit bigger than my dad's, but I still can't feel his shoes. And I'm not sure how that paradox happens, but throughout it all, he really has been there to help guide me and keep me, if I'm not on the right path, gently lead me back to the right path. And I would say that's probably been the most influential piece.
So you've been an inspiration, I think, to a lot of people in the industry with whether you're out driving around in your Jeep doing weather and road reports, or you're hiking through the through the Great Mountains and showing people how it's worthwhile getting somewhere, no matter how long and hard that journey is. And there's always a deeper message in anything and everything that you do. That's what I find the most fascinating about you, is that deep message. Where do you draw that inspiration from?
Well, Fletch, I'll just be honest with you. Growing up in a Southern, Christian home, we spent a lot of time talking about deeper understanding of humanity, and it wasn't about the religion piece. And I think people misconstrue that. It's about the relationship piece and learning how to have a relationship with others. And that grew for me from a scripture verse that then just became kind of my professional mantra. And the verse was, he didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to offer his life as a ransom for many. And I think about what we do in public safety, and there's no greater correlation than that. We don't come to this job for the accolades. We don't come to this job to be, giving gifts and everything and be recognized. We come to serve. And then we offer ourselves, our lives, as ransom for our public. The time that we give away from our families, the time that we give away from holidays, the time away from birthdays, missing out on our children's ball games. but at the same time, also putting ourselves in danger, looking out for the public itself and trying our best to fill that gap for those in need. And man, it just doesn't get any more inspirational than that. And when you remember why you do this, remember why you started, and you look in the faces of the people you've helped, and you run into them in the public and think, that child right there had a birthday this year because we did our job. That mother right there got to spend Christmas morning with someone that she loved because we did our job, and that's the best inspiration I have.
I saw your CEO Michael Martin, who was actually I think he's on the next episode.
Yeah, I think so.
And we recorded that a few weeks ago. I remember one of the things at 911 Goes to Washington a few years back. He told this story about a baby that was basically saved because of his technology. And he said a year from now, that's going to be the first individual that's alive today because of the technology that we developed. Or I'm paraphrasing, but
Right.
that even choked me up and watching him get choked up and seeing the passion behind the technology. I think that's something that's really, really special around your company, and what a great draw to have you in there to reinforce that that mantra throughout the company.
Yeah, and I would say, and I decided to go to the dark side, as you would say, and come from public sector, from the government side to private sector. Um, I mean, it was a hard choice, right? Because I knew that, man, am I ready for this leap? Am I ready for this step to get out of my comfort zone once again and to serve others? But then I looked at the core values of what RapidSOS stands for, and the reason that we're here, and the way we do business. And we may not ever be the biggest top dog, money maker in the world. We may not ever be an IBM of the '90s, but that's not our draw. That's not our commitment. That's not our service level. Our service level is to the PSAP. It's the people who are serving on the front lines, to equip them to make sure they have the technology, the location, and the data they need to make informed decisions. And when I realized that really aligned with my entire career, but also aligned with my personal mindset, it made that transition really simple.
As we get older, and we're all getting older. You're getting a lot older than me, but
No,
I'm kind of
I
staying.
refuse.
I worry about the next generation of 911 administrators. I think we've got a duty to make sure that they're well educated, that they are well informed, and that they're not biased in their opinions and are making the right decisions for the future. What have you done personally to plant those seeds and foster the growth of tomorrow's next generation 911 leader?
That's a good question, and I probably ask myself that more than anything, Fletch, because that's always been a goal of mine. I don't want to go into a place and try to affect some change because it's change I wanted. When I was on the NINA board, the executive board, I talked about one of the reasons I was there and gave them a very specific call, why I'm here and what my expectations are as president. It's not for us to have a Jamison wants to do this year and get accomplished and move on. No, it's how do we set up this organization to ensure that we are fulfilling the needs and the desires of those folks who are yet to come. And you're right, man, we face a huge problem in 911 in the coming years because it's an industry nobody wants to stay in because it's tough. It doesn't pay great. And so that means that our leadership pool is dwindling. It's really evaporating. And we had to find ways to make sure that we have these people, that we invest in them, that we give them the training like you talked about. But also, I think we have to teach them how to invest in themselves. Understand that, hey, when I was director at Weakley County here in Tennessee, for about 3 years there, I set aside an hour a week, one of my lunch breaks every week, just to study something related to 911. Didn't have to be anything cool. It could be a YouTube video. It could be somebody talking about the E&P exam. It could literally be a podcast, which I do almost religiously every morning while I'm getting ready. It's one or two or three podcasts that I have to get ready for the day. But we have to understand that, our success and our leadership potential is not just invested about things outside. It's things that we have to commit to internally as well. And so when I'm out hiking or when I'm out, speaking to people, whether it be here in the States or recently here in Mexico, that's an opportunity. And I'll make sure that when I go into that opportunity, that I have myself prepared and ready to go. I don't ever want to walk in and give just some flamboyant speech and like, oh, everybody just clap. That was good. I want to make sure they walk away with something. They walk away with a nugget in their mind that turns into, like you said, like a seed that gets planted. And over time, with them investing in it, with them watering it, with them tending to it, it's going to grow. And it's a responsibility we both share.
Do you remember your very first 911 call?
I remember my very first 911 call by myself because we worked a one-man shop, and I still see this person. The very first 911 call I took by myself. It was second shift, and they got up and walked out, and I was there by myself. Shocker, I know. And it was a Friday afternoon, and school was letting out, and I had 3 or 4 hang-up calls in a row from the same location. And then I had a third-party caller say, hey, I think there's a domestic going on here. I said, okay, I've got some calls. And I was dispatching resources as well. And the 4th time that this person called back, there had been a domestic. There had been a fight over the weapon. The weapon had discharged and struck the perp in the head. And there was a child actually in between. The mother was holding a child, and he was fighting for the weapon, and it went off. And it was a friend of mine. And everybody in this world knows me as Jamison. But those who went to school with me or friends of my family know me as Jamie. And I was like, 911, where's your emergency? And she said, Jamie. I was like, crap, this is somebody I know, and I don't know what's going on. And it shook me for a second. But man, after that moment, I was hooked. And I still see that girl that was being held in her mother's arms is now 22, 23, 24 years old. See her in town, see her on Instagram occasionally, going on with her life. And again, that's just like, wow, that was like one of the very first ones by myself. And I knew then, boy, I'm hooked on this. This is good stuff.
Well, you know what? That's the amazing thing. Most people would think that people become 911 telecommunicators because of the limited hours, the high pay, and the low stress job.
Okay.
Right. But it's the satisfaction, right? And I can, even though I haven't back then it wasn't even 911 calls. It was just calls to a 7-digit number in the early 80s. But I still remember the very first call I took, and I remember very specific calls that I took. And I was in charge of 3 towns, and I had ambulances going every which way across all 3 towns, backing up, and it was like this big Ouija board that I just made work.
Yep.
And I remember sit back and going, yeah, baby, that's the way you do it. And I still feel that excitement today. And that's, oh my God, talking 40 years later. Oof. And,
did you take calls by teletype or was
somebody in the parking lot? Hey.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because what's really changed in 40 years?
You know what?
I mean, honestly, what's really changed?
When you come down to the core thing, people still ring my phone and say, help, get me resources here. And what's changed is a little bit of technology that helps me determine where someone might be.
Yeah. So I would say that, for both of our careers, it's always been the call, even all the way back to my dad when he was going out addressing the first 911 implementation. It's still a phone call and just a little bit of data. And I know you talked about our CEO, Michael, talk about this a lot, but 2020 has been a crazy year. But by all intents and purposes, it's been crazy. But 2021, it's going to open some doors for us. And I want to be careful what I talk about here, but that paradigm is going to shift. And you've been around long enough to remember when we started getting cellular calls. We're not going to take them cellular calls. I can't find them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't get their name on my screen. And then all of a sudden, now we don't think anything about cellular. If it doesn't come in phase 2, we're shocked. Why does it come in phase 2? And we have additional data, and we have location information services now that are delivering the location of the caller before they actually ring the phone, which is just wonderful. I think that Internet of Things are going to change that landscape once again.
I just read an article, and I believe it was a woman down in Tennessee, actually. She had called 911, and for some reason the call was disconnected before the telecommunicator could answer it. And it came through as a 911 hang up. And the TC actually called back twice and got no answer. And it was 12 days later when, unfortunately, the woman was found dead. And that's unfortunate. And I'm reading the article, and it's starting to take a shift to the telecommunicator didn't do their job. The agency didn't do their job. And it's starting to get under my skin a little bit because it's perception and lack of understanding of the technology and what's happening. And in reality, nobody could have done anything different there that would have improved that without the entire process changing, right?
I agree.
You had somebody uttering something that was caught on tape because they're recording on the trunk side, and whoever listens to that, there's usually nothing to listen to.
That's right. And I think that's not going to change. I think that we're going to be held to a higher level of responsibility with fewer and fewer resources. And that's been the mantra of public safety for years, right? Higher responsibility, but we're going to give you less to work with. And so we have to be intelligent about how we deploy systems now.
This is where I think the public, we're so good at educating people in our industry. Mm-hmm. I think we all need to do a better job to educate people outside of our industry. If they only had an understanding of, I'm in a 20-story building on a multi-line telephone system, you have no idea where you are in the building. Or if you know that I'm at cube 2C 231, that's not really useful because you don't know where that is. If they just stop and put their feet in those shoes for 1 second, which is a big ask. But that's why I think shows are important. Like, what's the new one? Emergency Call? Is it?
Right.
Where they're going into the centers. And they're doing a great job of telling the backstory. I think that's really, really important. What are you guys doing at RapidSOS to get the public message out there?
That's a great question. And so,
come on, dude.
Right.
Come on. It's
I don't know who wrote these questions for you, man, but they did a great job. No, I would say that yes, the public piece is huge. And most of the public education starts locally, right? It really does start locally. But there's a distant family to 911 that we sometimes forget about that we at RapidSOS have really been focusing on, and that's healthcare and telematics and connected devices. And it's also, carriers, but also the device manufacturers, and having those recurring calls on a regular basis about, hey, I understand you as an EMS provider want to be able to effect a quicker response to cardiovascular incident, get them to a lab somewhere so that we can do some type of interaction with that person within the first 30 minutes to an hour. How does 911 fit into that? Can we get the call there faster? How can we get the data there faster? Can we use connected devices from the patient through 911 to the response mechanism so that you know exactly what you're rolling into, so that you walk into some cardiac event, but you already know ahead of time because of a $200 device you can buy on Amazon. You're seeing a difference in ST elevations. You're seeing a run of tachycardia in that patient. Understanding that whole process, understanding that, yes, patient care is extremely important. And we always thought the call starts with 911, but it really starts with the patient. Does the patient have any connected devices? Does the patient have a history that we need to know about? Can the patient go in and put on emergency health profile data in their phone for free on a website, and we get all that delivered immediately at time of call? Yeah, we can. And we can do it today. So how do we make sure they understand that, so that when they are out evangelizing for public health, for public safety, that they're also including the fact that, hey, at your time of need, have all these things ready to go. When I think about where we're going to be for the medical side of this fence and how COVID has brought to light so many areas of improvement, it's going to be a pretty amazing. I'm telling you, 2021 is going to be a pretty amazing year. It's just, and it's not, big federal government money coming in. It's not, massive changes. It's companies that are stepping up and saying, you know what, we have the resources. We can we can bear some of this burden for 911 and make sure that we have all the data that we can get from the patient, but you have it as well, so that you can pass it on to the responder. I think that, well, I'll just say that we just finished up a course in Tennessee called Telecommunicator CPR. A really in-depth course for our TCs, understanding, agonal respirations and out of hospital cardiac arrest and all those things. And it's amazing to watch telecommunicators say, wow, there's things that we need to educate ourselves on. Like if I'm on the phone and I'm hearing agonal respirations, we should start compressions. That flies in the face of everything we ever learned about not breathing, right? But agonal respirations, with the understanding from the medical side of this fence, they say, hey, but agonal respirations, they're not effective. We have to do something for that caller before, because they're leading down that path and they're going into cardiac arrest. So those things are two-way streets. They really are. It's what we can share with them about what we need for time of call and what they can share from the patient, but also understanding their workflows and processes, so we can cross-train, understand that, hey, we could probably be better, not just in data, but just in operations. The way we answer calls, the way we query callers, how do we make sure that we're working with additional data sources throughout the call? And I'll just stop by saying I look forward to the day to when quality assurance programs and quality assurance reviews have a question, did you check additional data resources? Because if we're not checking them, then we're not really doing quality, because there's additional data cards there for medical issues, for connected devices, for heart rate monitors, et cetera. We're doing some great things in the San Francisco area that will release later that are just mind-bending about how much data we can get from that patient to push to our responders for a more effective response.
It always shocked me how much some components of the industry almost appear to be fighting against the additional data. And, one of the things that is really kind of disappointing is that the indoor wireless location standard, again, is getting kicked down kicking the can down the road even further.
Right.
And, I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox, but I mean, how many times do we have to prove that this problem is solvable today? And we just put a little implementation around existing technology. This is not the boogeyman.
It's not. And you know very well about standards development and how long that takes. And then you couple that with, how long it takes to change a regulation or a law related to 911.
Yeah.
And, when this RapidSOS first came on the scene, it was like, well, we're not going to do over-the-top applications. We're not going to do that. We're not going to allow that. And then they started understanding, man, we are absolutely hanging ourselves. This is the dumbest thing we could have ever said, because what we're doing is saying you can't have actionable data that's in a timely manner, that's geo-referenced, just because we've never done it that way before.
Yeah.
And that has changed drastically. And that started with device-based hybrid. That started with additional data location information from the caller. But now when you start moving into additional data, my heart bleeds Nina red, right? That. And the standards work we do is absolutely amazing, but technology and Moore's law is just accelerating beyond the point of us being able to keep up with the standard. And so we've adjusted quite a bit for best practices, for informational documents, those things that we can get out really quickly on new technologies to assist that. And I think that's where Nina will continue to go, right? We can still work on the standards-based stuff for those core pieces that we need everybody to interop with, so that we have to build those to a certain standard. But other things, the operationalization of those things, how do we actually work those pieces, the new technology coming in, Nina continues to lead that forefront. And that's where people like that work with us at RapidSOS, we want them involved in that standards-based organization because we want them understanding where the industry is going, so that if we're, at least right now, if we're not simpatico, we're not on the same path, we're at least on the same road in a different lane. Sooner or later, we're going to merge. And when we merge, everything is already going to be in play. And again, the end goal is a better response for that person in need.
About 12 years ago, or maybe even a little longer, a very, very intelligent person whom you know as well, said to me, Fletch, next generation 911 isn't just about the technology. The primary core initiative here needs to be the
Get it?
wow, operationalizing of
Yep.
the standards and
Coffee.
protocols.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I need is more coffee. And that person, believe it or not, is someone you ended up marrying.
Yeah, I did.
And,
Married up.
tell me about it. Does this make us relatives? Because we used to consider each other's 911 spouses because
I
we
think
would
so.
argue so much. People go, "Are you two married?"
Exactly. And that's kind of been the running joke in the house too, right? It's like, hey, I'm gonna have Fletch on the TV today. She's like, oh, tell him I said hi.
My 911 husband.
Right. And I joke around, we're kidding here, but my wife has been such a leader on the private sector side for so many years, such a deep current on changing the way we think about GIS and core services architecture and things like that. And it's just, you Google her name and she's on standards documents all over the place, and Google my name, I'm like, I'm in the paper for, some call we took. And I joke around, I say, I didn't realize when we started dating and we got married, really how difficult it was going to be for me to be such a trophy husband to somebody who's so amazing.
I first met her when she worked for Plant CML, and she was the
Right.
product manager. And, I was working at Nortel at the time, and, that at that time, Plant was a bolt-on top of
Right.
the Nortel PBX. And she used to scream at me, and I used to scream at her, and it was just... But at the end of the day, we were always friends. And
Right.
I remember when she told me that she was dating you, and I was so proud of her. And well, you got a good one.
Yeah, we kept that pretty quiet for a while. We really did. We don't let work cross those boundaries.
Yeah.
And and working at home has been fun.
I can imagine.
So it's like, there are times we put the note on the door, says, hey, I'm talking about things you need to know about. Don't come in here. Okay, cool. So yeah.
Well, if there were ever two people that could pull that off, I think it's you and Lisa that could pull that off the best and absolutely maintain that level of sanctity that needs to be maintained there.
I tell you, it's one of the core things that we had to discuss when we started dating. It's like, hey, we're going to draw some hard lines between work and home, because if we don't, it's going to lead to some things that we don't need to be involved in, right? And we never want to give the
Exactly.
appearance that we're doing anything other than being exceptionally professional in everything that we do
Absolutely.
in our work, and exceptionally loving in everything we do in our home.
Yep. And you've achieved that. I think you and her both have the highest level of respect. And today, I think a lot of people still would never even associate the two of you together had they not seen you together somewhere in a social function outside of the industry.
Right.
And congrats on that. That's an amazing feat that you've pulled off. So,
Thanks, brother.
what's your vision for the future? I mean, what if you could have one thing tomorrow that just was solved and went away? What would that one thing be?
Man, that's a good one.
Right?
I think I know what it is. I know
Okay.
exactly what it is. I want to remove the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our telecommunicators' minds about new technologies. And I'll explain really briefly here more. We as TCs, since the dawn of time, and you were there, since the dawn of time, we have been taking in additional data with every call, but it's always been analog. It's always been auditory.
Auditory, yep.
Right? We hear things going on in the background. We hear dishes being broken. We hear a gunshot. We hear, a fight. We hear sirens approaching a scene and knowing the response is close. We hear the stress in our caller's voice. We hear a child who's, found someone who's deceased and doesn't understand what's going on. We've always heard that. And we process that in our brains in just nanoseconds. And then we're putting all that information into a call for service. We're stripping it down, removing all the emotion, all the extra things, putting it into a call for service, shipping it to a dispatcher, right? So all additional data has been coming in. We've been processing it. Now, sooner or later, the metrics will flop. And I really honestly believe that in the next, 4 to 5 years probably, we'll see more calls initiated from non-human interfaces than we do actual 911 calls. Right. We'll just know. We'll know that, oh my gosh, there's accident interstate. We see this. That concerns us as TCs, and it should, right? Because again, operators, what you said. Yeah. How do we operationalize that? There you go. How do we operationalize that to make sure that we're effecting an appropriate response? But what we're doing with ADR today and what we're going to be doing with ADR tomorrow is taking all that data you've been hearing and so much more contextual information about that location or about that incident and shipping it to you automatically into your screen. And you're still hearing what's going on here, but you're just validating what you see on the screen as far as the data flow goes. Absolutely. And so instead of somebody calling us and saying, hey, you have a fire alarm at this location, zone 37 Bravo, we'll contact the key holder, click. Okay, that's an entire company we're sending out. However, if it's an industrial complex and we're getting the information dumped into CAD for us with additional data resources, not just things like the old school ASAP to PSAP, but the newer technologies that we're doing now, where it's not just hey, it's a fire alarm going off or a smoke alarm going off. And by the way, the thermostat in the adjoining room is at 145 degrees. Okay, we have an active fire. That's 2 companies now because maybe it's an industrial complex. The responder knows this. They're seeing this same information coming in from the alarm data, but they're overlaying their pre-plan information. They're overlaying the hazmats for that location automatically in their response vehicle. And so it's not just we have a 2 million square foot industry complex with hazmat somewhere inside. We know where the alarm's at. We know where the fire is at. We know the temperature of the fire before we ever turn a tire. And we also know the location of the hazmat information inside that warehouse, whatever it may be. And so when we start responding, we know that, hey, maybe this is a protection of the hazmat side, but it's also a response to put the fire out in internal attack. Those things change, but those things take relationships at the national and at the local level. But it also takes a mindset that says, you know what, this is coming, and there are things we have to figure out, but I'm not going to have a fear of it. It's the same thing we've always been doing. The calls are not changing. The data stream is becoming broader, but at the end of the day, it's what we do, and we adapt and we overcome, and when we get past the fear piece of that, we start looking at what we can do to actually affect a more appropriate response. It's going to change emergency response paradigm in this country in just probably 18, 24 months. And that's huge because it's not the old days, Mark, where you walked up and you put in a new phone system at one location and then they got some new data, right? These companies are rolling out as they do it nationwide. This week, this company's going to turn it on. Next week, this company's going to turn it on. The following week, this company's going to turn it on. And it happens at a nationwide level. And so particularly those folks who are in integrated rapid portal with us, or they're using jurisdiction view, every time some company comes on and turns that on, it's there.
Yep.
It's there. And it blows my mind. It's not we're going to do this 6,000 times across the US. It's when companies come to the platform, they're integrated with APIs, the data's there. Man, what a great time to be in 911. What just a fascinating time to be in public safety.
Absolutely. I'm gonna play you something. I'm gonna try to at least. I dug this up while you were talking about that. This was probably back close to 2010. I'm gonna say there was a large refinery. I think it was a Chevron refinery out on the West Coast where there was a fire. And clearly security there had a ring down to the local PSAP.
Right.
Just because of the way the dispatcher answers. She picks up the line, "Hey, Chevron." And I'm going to play you the call here. And here's where it's a perfect example of, even though it's a human communicating, how the wrong information can get misinterpreted. So take a listen to this.
Okay.
Hey, Chevron.
Hello, we have a fire in a process unit 4 crude.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
We got a process unit coming to gate 31. It'll be a first level response for you guys.
Okay, what does that mean? How many do you need?
Perfect example of somebody communicating irrelevant information or non-actionable information.
Right.
And the dispatcher having no idea what to do.
Right. And it's, we're going to affect some response to this, right? But again, if we had a way where data was conformant and data was presented in a way that's actionable data, timely manner, geo-referenced, situations like this really become few and far between.
Exactly.
And I think this went on to be a pretty intense call, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a pretty bad refinery fire from what I remember. But again, it's a level whatever response. I mean, again, somebody using cryptic terms audibly to a dispatcher who has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But again, that call coupled with sensor data and IoT devices, they wouldn't have even needed the voice call. And when that ring down hit, they would probably answer, "We've got 7 units on the way.
Exactly.
Just confirm what gate you want them at."
Yeah, exactly. Where's your ingress point? That's fantastic. And I know people think, man, this will never happen where I'm at. Listen, I'm living in a relatively rural area of the United States, right? And I love it here. But the data that's available at New York PD is going to be available in Weakley County, Tennessee at the exact same moment.
Yep.
And if we have our heads in the sand and we think this is never going to happen, that changes things so quickly when the public expects pizza delivery. When I log into my app for Domino's, they know what my usual order is. Do I just want to repeat that order? They know where I live. They know who I am. And at 911, we can't. And we think that's a far off concept, and it's really not. It's really not. We're really closing that gap very quickly. But
I just like to get that app to stop using my credit card. That's all. When you order.
Well, I appreciate all those pizzas using them. They're fantastic. I got them on auto ship.
Oh, listen, man, I could go on for 2 hours with you, and this is just amazing, amazing information. And I hope that people can see what someone can do with their career as they move through public safety, as they move through government agencies, and still move into the public sector, because now you've got a new mission, and that's to foster and harvest all the seeds that you have grown over the 2 or 3 decades that are out there. It's time to bring the crops in, is all I can say, James.
That's a good point, right?
And I'm glad you're here to do that.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. And it's, you've been a part of that process all along. We served together on many different NENA functions, including the Institute Board. And I just tell you, it's man, you say 2 to 3 decades, that's kind of scary, right? I'm like, am I that old? And I think back to those moments, when you realize that, man, just a little bit more contextual information here, a little bit additional data there. Maybe our officer doesn't get involved in an officer-involved shooting. Maybe we affect a better response because we know that this accident with rollover had airbag deployment and there were 3 people inside instead of 1 that we only see in the vehicle and 2 were ejected. We don't know that till we get on the scene. Knowing that ahead of time, man, how can we not be excited but also be equally committed to pushing forward to those boundaries to make sure that we understand, hey, these things are happening today. They are happening today. And next week, we could be affecting calls based upon new technology we received last week. And that's just, for me, man, it just feeds my passion all day long.
You know, for if anybody wanted the thrill of being a lifesaver as their energy for being a telecommunicator, Next Generation 911 should accelerate that feeling to so many more people that they will actually save. And there's no other feeling in the world going home knowing that something that you did allowed someone to live today. And this is something that typically a firefighter, a paramedic, a first responder in the field gets as part of their daily job. Telecommunicators never got that feeling before because they never knew about the incident and they never had the ability to contribute. Now they know about it, they can contribute, they can affect it, and they know the outcome, so there's closure, which is more important than probably almost anything for personal well-being, which is also something that we have to take care of.
You know, you talk about Next Gen 911 and people ask, you know, when are we going to see this revolution? We're not. It's an evolution. Yeah. And we're consistently seeing that growth day after day after day. And you're right. It is things like technology. It's data. It's connections. It's you know, using ways of connecting to the network. It's core services architecture. It's GIS. But at the end of the day, it still centers around the linchpin, which is a telecommunicator. They are the central nervous system of every response in this country. They read inputs from some type of nerve that's been touched. They affect muscles and skeleton to affect some kind of response to mitigate that nerve. And so, you know, all these things are great. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure we bring our telecommunicators along with us.
Absolutely. You know, people ask me all the time, Jamison, why are you so passionate about this industry? And I look back at them and I say, how can you not be passionate about this industry? Right. My God, I can't imagine how a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon must feel every single day of their lives, right? Knowing that they're impacting positively people's lives. We get to feel that every once in a while when we do a good job. But how can you not be excited about being on the forefront of an evolution that will change mankind? And I know that sounds way up here, but
it's not. It's the
not.
Truth. It is the
not.
truth.
Yeah.
You are changing mankind in the moment of their greatest need, and they rely upon you, a stranger, to effect a perfect response. And to be honest, for 99.79s of that, we're killing it, dude. We are absolutely blowing it out of the water. So how can we even get better? How can we go that extra ninth, piece of that? And I think that starts with location and data, and we're going to supply people with that.
Yeah, the cool part is we can do something about it, and we are doing it. So, again, Jamison, if I don't stop here, we're gonna be into tomorrow.
The longest podcast ever.
But I really appreciate you sitting down with me, my friend. It's been far, far too long. We need to do this much more often. Thank you for everything you've done in your career. Thank you for your compassion, for your passion for this industry, and passion for doing it right, and passion for just getting that information out there in everything that you do. And take care of my ex-wife, damn it.
Too far, Mark. Too far.
I'm sorry. Tell her I said
brother,
hi.
I
know she's a big part of what you do. She's an inspiration.
Yeah, she is. She's great.
Behind every good man is a better woman, right?
Absolutely right. 100%. Yeah, she's my better 2/3.
There you go. So, all right. Well, listen, my friend, thanks so very, very much. Final thoughts for the telecommunicator of tomorrow. What's the number one thing they need to keep on their mind? Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself. Take care of your teammates. None of this works without you. And if we're burning out too much, we're not taking care of our stress levels, we're not taking care of our body and our minds. If we're not incorporating those things into our mindset, our skill set, and our culture, and our comm center, we're going to fail. And so it starts and ends with a telecommunicator. So take care of yourself. And if you're listening to this and you're not a TC, ship them some cookies, buy them pizza, send them a thank you note. Do something every once in a while to that comm center that you have locally to ensure that they understand we know you're there and we appreciate everything that you do.
Yeah, one of the coolest things I ever heard was in the school shooting up in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. somebody reached out, called the local pizza place and said, here's my credit card number. I don't care what they need or what they want. Call them, find out, deliver it, and put it on my card. And that person went anonymous for quite some time because they weren't looking for the recognition. They were looking to go help someone in the industry that was dealing with a massive school shooting, and they know the impact that it was going to cause. I was so proud of that person for thinking beyond themselves, thinking beyond the incident, and thinking about the people that are impacted. There are good people out there.
There are a lot of them, and a lot of them are in public safety.
Yes, sir. So, all right, my friend, listen, you have a great day. Thanks so much for sitting down with us. We'll do this again real soon.
Sounds good, sir. See you soon.
So that wraps up yet another episode of Next Gen 911 FutureMakers. This is Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety at 911 Inform. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Fletch911. Check out the rest of my blogs and podcasts at www.fletch.tv. And you can catch all of our FutureMaker podcasts at www.ng911FutureMakers.com. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. Stay safe and have a great day.